So today you're going to get a Semke Dharma rant. And it was precipitated by an invitation that Venerable Tarp and I recently accepted from Gonzaga University, from one of their professors, Professor Michael Harvey, to talk to one of the graduate programs there of students who were doing I don't know what the master's degree was on, but one of these courses was called Mindfulness and Leadership. So Venerable Tarpa took the mindfulness aspect of the talk. And before we went, Venerable had asked us to put some compassion in the talk if we could. So I went ahead and I put it in with the leadership aspect of the sharing that we did that day. And one of the things that I wanted to say so many things today. I have been, this is the rant. I have been absolutely flabbergasted and horrified by the lack of compassionate leadership in this country, in particular around Hurricane Maria and the whole thing about taking a knee, and these transgendered young people who are getting butchered by other human beings. And there's nobody in charge who's calling up integrity and compassion and wisdom in our country right now, as far as I'm concerned. There's some gifted ones in there for sure, but not up at the front. And so there are two things that have given me some hope today. And so two things. First is getting prepared for the talk. I went online just to first of all, get the definition of leadership. And while I was going through the web, I found something from one of the people I personally admire very much in this world, Pope Francis. And he did a talk to his cardinals, all the bigwigs at the Vatican, 2 years ago, and it was called The Diseases That Affect Leadership. And so I wanted to go through, I was going to do a few of them today. Mostly it was within the context of organizational structures, institutional structures, corporate structures, but I think leadership in any form, even if you're the head of a family, I think the qualities of compassionate leadership can really apply. And so I wanted to put it in and also to give some Dharma medicine. The Pope gives some antidotes to some of these diseases of leadership, but I wanted to introduce also some Dharma. And the reason that I felt even more determined about sharing this is that I was looking at the news this morning to see what was going on. And there was an incident at the Air Force Academy 2 days ago that I wanted to share. And why I want to share it is that we have one of the most exemplary people who shows compassionate leadership in the Air Force Academy. And what happened is there's a prep school that has to go with U.S. Air Force Academy, Colorado Springs, some young cadets, and they have whiteboards on their doors. And some of the black cadets had people saying, "Go home," on their doors. Now, in a lot of institutional things, they'll try to downplay this, apologize, and do it behind the lines and get things squared up. Well, Lieutenant General J. Silveira, who is the superintendent of the U.S. Air Force Academy, called 5,500 of his staff, faculty, and the Air Force Academy and the prep school together, and he gave a 5-minute talk yesterday that was just incredible. And what he basically said is that these kind of things cannot take away our values and our integrity. He says, we pride ourselves in our growing diversity in this academy because the Air Force is protecting an increasingly diverse population of American citizens, and we want this academy to represent that. And he said, if you can't treat someone with dignity and respect, and he went through women, people of different economic, social backgrounds, people of different race, people of different ethnicity, he said, go home. I don't want you here. You don't belong here. And his talk was it was straight on, it was compassionate, and it was uncompromising. And to let everybody know, and it wasn't just the cadets, he went to the staff, he went to the people who worked in the kitchen, he went to the faculty, he went to everybody. He says, I want everybody to hear what I have to say. That we value diversity, we value dignity and respect in this community. This is a family. And if you can't live by those rules, please leave. And so, I'm saying, okay, this is what compassionate leadership looks like. It's uncompromising, it's clear, it's not blaming, but it's really stating, because integrity, respect, and dignity are some of the fundamental qualities of someone who is in a leadership role. So then I wanted to go with, so what I wanted to share was some of these diseases of leadership. And I have to say that a lot of them, unfortunately, many people in power in our country right now have these diseases, some of these symptoms. And so I'm going to just share a few of them, and then also what some of the Dharma antidotes and some of the medicines that could work for some of these. Okay, so the first disease is thinking that we are immortal, immune, or downright indispensable. A leader or a leadership team that does not self-evaluate itself, which does not keep up on things in the present, the context of custom, culture, society, does not seek to be more fit in shape to handle the things that arise, is a sick body. It is a disease of those who turn themselves into lords and masters, who think of themselves above others and not at their service. Pathology of power comes from superiority complexes and narcissism, which passionately gaze at its image in the mirror and does not see the faces of others, especially the most vulnerable in whom we serve. So Pope Francis, this is the translation of his talk to the Curia. Antidote, humility. To say heartily, I am merely a servant. I have only done what is my duty to serve the people, and to truly understand what that means. And so Lama Yeshe, one of our great Tibetan teachers, said to his students back at Venerable's time, when the first wave of Westerners came, he said that they needed to recite this mantra, I am a servant of others, I am a servant of others, I am a servant of others. We have it painted on a sign in our workshop, actually, about this whole idea about we are, with our bodhicitta motivation, our whole mode of wanting to live is to be able to serve and to go and to benefit others. And that it is an ethical responsibility to care for them, especially those most vulnerable, those most marginalized, those that are most incapacitated. So that's the first disease of leadership, is the disease of thinking you're immortal, immune, or downright indispensable. Now here's one here that we have to all kind of look at. It's called the disease of excessive busyness. So immersed in our work that we forget to rest a while, which leads to stress and agitation. And because we have a club in this community that's called the Overachievers Club, which all of us are members of, it's good to keep an eye on this particular malady. So Pope Francis says the antidote is a time for rest for those who have completed their work is necessary, obligatory, and needs to be taken seriously. And so in the Lam Rim, we have, under the far-reaching practice of joyous effort, we have 4 powers. And the 4th one is the power of rest, which is to keep an eye on ourselves when we are creating virtue and to rest after our endeavors. If not, our bodies and minds will become exhausted. And what may even happen, this is from Geshe Sopa, is that we may begin to get upset about creating virtue and may develop an aversion to it. We are wiped out by our own enthusiasm. So we get so tired and push that we forget to see that it's about us taking care of ourselves, but we start thinking that the problem is out there. With the Dharma is asking too much of me, my teacher is asking too much of me, I'm falling behind, I can't keep up. When in fact it's just really evaluating one's own capacity and to take rest. So that's the second disease. The third one is the disease of poor coordination. Now this one I went right to our Congress. Our leaders lose a sense of community among themselves. The body loses its harmonious function and its equilibrium. It then becomes an orchestra that just produces a lot of noise. Members do not work together and lose the spirit of camaraderie and teamwork, as exemplified in the analogy of, this is what happens when they lose that spirit of camaraderie. And we have this analogy somewhat similar also in the Dharma, is that Pope Francis says the analogy of the foot saying to the arm, I don't need you. or the hand saying to the head, I'm in charge. So this is the whole idea about cooperation, collaboration, interdependence. So the antidotes, this is what when I was thinking about this, I said, well, what about going back to the basics? What are we doing here and why are we doing it? Has our motivation become polluted by self-interest? Has attachment to reputation, fame, material worth, praise crept into our endeavors? Have we lost track of our deeper intention? So we start becoming disharmonious, when we start really losing the spirit of working together. Maybe we need to reconnect to our motivation, our attachment to our ideas, our attachment to being right, to revisit our motivation and recharge it with our bodhicitta. The other one that I also thought that would be a good antidote for this poor coordination is to see that everything that we do together in a sense of community, whether it's in an organization or a congressional configuration or a family, is to see that it is all a dependent arising. And that if we want our actions to bear particular beneficial fruits, we need to ask ourselves, are we creating the causes for it? That's been the most stymieing thing about a lot of our political process lately, is that we see that their end, they want to produce a result. Healthcare, tax cuts, whatever. But when you see the kind of causes they're creating, they're discordant with the result. And it's not about willing it, it's not about pushing it, it's not about shoving it through, it's really about getting a consensus. Anger, suspicion, disharmony, concealment, and greed do not bring the results of happiness and benefit. So to see that we need to create harmonious, concordant causes if we want to experience the results. And then the last one, I think, for medicine of poor coordination, sort of bringing a group of people back to a sense of community among themselves, is to find those things, no matter how small, that we agree with, and build on those rather than really focusing on the differences. This is, once again, let's find something. Where are we meeting? Is there any place that we have a common motivation? Do we have a common vision? Do we have a common process? And let's start at that place rather than all the things that we don't see eye to eye on. And then number 4, the disease of gossiping, grumbling, and backbiting. I mean, this is a pope talking to his curia, his cardinals, okay? He says, this is a grave illness which begins simply even as small talk and takes over a person, making him or her become a sower of weeds. It is a disease of a cowardly person who lacks the courage to speak out directly, but speaks behind other people's backs. This is the terrorism of gossip. So in our community, we've tried very hard the past few years to use compassionate communication so that if we do need to speak and give feedback and try to connect with people we're having difficulty with, we try to find a form of communication that people can hear us, that we express things from our side rather than blaming and criticizing, backbiting, grumbling, or gossiping. So my antidote to this is to counteract immediately if we find ourselves in a conversation about anyone who is not present, and it's about their faults or shortcomings, or there's some negative opinions that are coming from other people out of anger, resentment, or jealousy, to just stop the presses. Either change the subject, saying, I'm really uncomfortable with where this discussion is going, or move on to something more beneficial, or leave the room. I mean, this is something that is hard not to do sometimes, especially with a close-knit group or organization where you know each other very well. Conflicts are going to arise. Also, I thought that look at the karmic result of divisive speech. Others will talk about us behind our backs in the future. And we will continue to grow the habit of divisive speech. So once again, to really see, why are we doing it? And so that's one of the things that Pope Francis said, that this is one of the main maladies of poor leadership, is this disease of gossiping, grumbling, and backbiting. And then last of the 5 that I want to share today is the disease of idolizing superiors. All right, so you've got leadership and you've got a little bit of a a system here, people of less experience, more experience, specialization, whatever talents, how long they've been there. This concerns those who court their superiors in hopes of gaining favor. They are victims of careerism and opportunism. They honor the person rather than the vision of the whole. They think only of what they can get and not what they can give. Small-minded, self-centered, and unhappy. All right, so this is once again, it's all around motivation. Why are we getting involved? Why are we praising our seniors? Why are we praising our leaders, our presidents, our whatevers? What are we trying to get? On the other hand, superiors are just as vulnerable. They can be affected by this disease when they try to obtain the submission, loyalty, and psychological dependency of their subordinates, which ends in unhealthy complicity. So once again, the superior then uses their power, uses their influence to basically manipulate people, threaten them, humiliate them, be sarcastic in front of their peers, to drive people to where they're just afraid to be honest, afraid to be authentic, afraid to really give sincere feedback, even to people in power. So the antidote to this is to cultivate and hold true to our personal integrity, to check that the 8 worldly concerns are not running the show, which is attachment to praise, attachment to reputation, aversion to criticism or bad reputation, that many times our motivation has been polluted by the 8 worldly concerns. And this is the self-centeredness running rampant, absolutely running rampant. So Pope Francis has a whole list. I wanted to get to think about this because I think it's important to not only recognize the problem, but then to really cultivate and try to cultivate, and using our wisdom to try to say, well, what would be the medicine? What would be the antidote to these kind of behaviors and these kind of ways of thinking, not only out there in the big world, not only out there in the administration or in the world world stage, but what about in our own relationships to community, to family, to where we work, to where we go to school? And that these can very much be used in our own practice to make sure that we have the qualities that, what was it here? To bring everybody together to share the common vision and to address different opinions, different ideas, to make sure that everybody gets heard. So, I just wanted to put that out there because I need some antidotes to the way I'm thinking about what's going on. And also to be inspired by the people that we have in our world that are compassionate leaders, including Pope Francis and Lieutenant General Silvieri, and many, many, many more.